My question is, can you just dig a little deeper on this responsibility that hip-hop artists have? I mean, we're in a moment in America where, yes, I sit with you in terms of Kim Kardashian not necessarily being the only face of criminal justice reform, but being an important one at the moment. What more can they do? Georgia took major steps, a red state, you're there. What more? I mean, do you feel like these artists, when they interact with the system, they're more prone not to want to necessarily be advocates because they've been affected by it? And how can we make them become the next Meek Mill or T.I. for that matter that's in Georgia?
So first of all, I would be remiss not to shout out the first lawyer that defended hip-hop people in trouble was out of the Bronx, a guy named Murray Richmond. I don't know if you ever heard of Murray Richmond. He's an icon in older hip-hop for being there in the beginning, and bless his heart, he was the first guy. So can I use you as a segue to Meek Mill? Okay, is that cool?
Feel free.
So let's talk about Meek Mill, and if this doesn't answer your question, just punch me in the face later.
How about we just give you another chance? Just give it a try.
So here's the thing about what happened in Meek Mill. I speak at least 24, 25 times a year to lawyers all over America. And one of the things that I'll always say is, will we agree that the three biggest problems with our criminal justice system are racism, collateral consequences, and mass incarceration? Everybody raises their hand. And I say, great. So we all agree, and all the American Bar Association, NACDL, we all agree, and we get cool editorials in the Washington Post and the New York Times and the Chicago Tribune, and we get pieces on 2020, and here's what happens. Nothing. Because we, particularly my age group, right, fail to recognize what we talked about earlier, and that is communication is changed forever. So Meek Mill, he was a rapper in Philadelphia, an icon in Philadelphia. You know, everybody loves him in Philly. He has a judge that's in love with his case, who happens to be an African-American woman, but nevertheless loves keeping and continuing him on probation, right, which is an issue of collateral consequences, because the consequences of a conviction are you keep somebody on probation, which is really, to me, the modern-day shackles. So you're keeping this black young man, okay, with his shackles around his ankle because he can't screw up over 10 years. Let me tell you something. There's a whole lot of people here that during the last 10 years probably maybe had that third or fourth drink and drove. Okay? But if you're Meek Mill, you have a judge that's just in love with extending it. And so then what she decides to do is when he pops a wheelie in New York, which he can't do with his motorcycle or whatever, and gets ticked off at somebody putting a camera in his face in St. Louis, revokes his probation. And she gives him 3 to 6 years. Right? So, which is part of the mass incarceration, because in America, that constitutes 5% of the world's population, but 20% of the world's incarcerated population. We think nothing of just put him in jail for 3 to 6 years. And of course, the race issue is the genre of music he is that's dominated by particularly young black men. So for 3 to 6 years, and what happens? Instagram goes crazy. Forget about editorials. We now engage people that are 18, 19, 23, 25 years old. They all of a sudden are engaged, not because of an editorial that nobody reads. They're engaged because of the gram. And they literally shut down that city on his behalf, and then later, with actual help from the local public defender's office and a progressive newly elected district attorney, he gets out. But I think the responsibility, I think the ones that are truly accountable and deserve the credit are the people that got folks stirred up on Instagram, one of whom was a great American hero, Colin Kaepernick. Colin Kaepernick has such a huge following because he's a victimized black man that his followers went crazy on Instagram coming to the assistance of Meek Mill.
It's interesting, before we get to the next question, something about the Meek Mill case. Like, we were in Philly visiting friends around the time that kind of broke open recently, and everyone was talking about Meek Mill. Our Lyft driver was on fire about Meek Mill. He had legal analysis about what happened. And I feel like some of these cases, especially the Meek Mill case, it's almost like it gave people a lens to look through and say, this is what's wrong. And because it was hip hop, everybody knew, at least everybody in Philly knew, probably everybody in the Delaware Valley knew who Meek Mill was. And it gave an object lesson in exactly what communities of color have been talking about for a long time, but they didn't have a high profile enough example to say, see, this is what we've been trying to tell you.
Yeah, no, you're right. And you know, there have been other issues. I get on my Instagram account that my son runs, you know, I get all these help these people, and I look and I'm like, oh, I don't, you know, this is a guy that shot somebody. He may have, you know, 100,000 followers on Instagram, but like he shot someone in front of 12 people. I don't think we need to be fighting for him as much as we do that someone gets their probation revoked for 3 to 6 years. But you're right, the visceral reaction to it was raw and deserving.